I fell in love with my 9 to 5. You can do it too. Hi everyone. So today we're talking about something that I never thought I would say. I fell in love with my 9 to 5. I want you to be happier in your 9 to 5, which is why I'm sharing my experience and I hope you find this helpful. The sort of title of falling in love with your 9 to 5 is obviously a bit clickbaity, but I really came to appreciate my 9 to 5. And I feel like the main reason is that I really had like a mind shift and my opinion really changed about working a 9 to 5. And there's like a few main factors that sort of contributed to that. Because I'm obviously talking about my experience and my job and sort of how I fell in love with my 9 to 5, I want to give you a bit more context because I feel like that's really important when you talk about these kind of things, right? Because this is obviously based purely on my experience. But first, let me take a sip of coffee because I'm really tired. I used to work in journalism. I was a freelancer for a couple of years. I want to say like almost 3 years. And I was doing sort of all sorts of jobs in the media industry. So I worked in TV, I did online, I did print, writing, translating. It was a really fun time. It's obviously like a really fun and interesting industry to be in, but it's also a very unstable industry to be in. So I remember when I first worked in a newsroom on, I think, day 3, the whole print department got laid off. I was in the online department and I was a freelancer. Even though I kind of worked 9 to 5, I was in the office full time, but I was self-employed. So that's sort of what I started off with, right? And I was like, I hate this, like I hate working a 9 to 5, I hate going to the office. That just didn't work for me, having like an office setting and being self-employed. And then I was fully self-employed and working my own hours, and I was able to sort of create my own schedule, which worked a lot better for me. But again, it's very unstable. You never really know when a gig is gonna come in, you don't know how long it's gonna last. Even if you do get a gig and you do get regular freelance gigs, it doesn't mean your invoices get paid on time, which is the bane of my existence. Please pay your freelancers on time, because even though I earned good money when I was self-employed, I had to like ask my partner to cover my share of the rent because I was just waiting for multiple invoices that just weren't paid. You know, it's just quite a stressful experience, and like my personality type, I think, is just not very well suited for that kind of life. I like stability, especially sort of financial stability, which sounds really boring, but honestly is really important. I think it's really important to talk about, especially for women. I know like the money topic can be a bit awkward, but I feel like it really shouldn't have to be. And I think it's fine to say like I like financial stability, I like having a paycheck that comes in every month. But I digress. Back to my background. So that's sort of what I started off with, right? So I had quite a lot of panic about being self-employed. I enjoyed lots of parts, and don't get me wrong, I did enjoy being self-employed. There's obviously so many positives to it, but the other parts I really did not enjoy, and I think you have to be a certain personality type to make it work. That was like in my mid-20s. I kind of like had a realization. I was like, I don't think this is for me right now. This is not to say I'm never gonna go back to like freelance life. I might, but like at that point in my life I was just kind of like done with it. Kind of added to that is that my boyfriend and I were planning to buy a flat in London, which is really expensive, and it's really hard to get a mortgage approved when you're self-employed. It's doable, like you can get a mortgage, but it's harder. So I'm at this point, I'm ready for a change, and I also kind of need a full-time income, like a regular employed income for my mortgage. So I started hunting for jobs, right? And in the first year of being like sort of 9 to 5 office based, I had a job where I had to commute 3 days a week, which I absolutely hated because I had to commute for honestly like almost 90 minutes every day. So like each way 90 minutes, which I think is a lot. And it was like not a nice commute as well. So I feel like if you're driving in your own car, it's kind of something different than being stuck on the tube in London with like strangers like literally being like pressed into their armpits for 90 minutes. Very different commute in my opinion. So it was that kind of commute. I was like in the underground, Central Line as well. We're based in London, you know, that's hell on earth. And yeah, I was just kind of like not enjoying myself, even though I did really enjoy the job I was doing. I was working in arts and culture. But yeah, I was just kind of like looking for something with more like flexible working, because in the first year of working that 9 to 5, I was struggling. So I was really unhappy in that job, even though I did enjoy the role. But I was really struggling with a set schedule, having to sort of go in the office 3 times a week. After being sort of self-employed and freelance for 3 years prior, I was kind of like struggling to get back into that routine and just having everything so like set in stone, and like obviously communicating with colleagues that you might not get on with and all of that kind of stuff, right? That first year of working a 9 to 5, I was really struggling. I was really unhappy with it. And I feel like my age also kind of contributed to that, because I was kind of like in my mid-20s, as I said. And I think that was the point where I was sort of hitting that point where you kind of wonder, like, is this going to be me now for like the rest of my life? Like, is this 9 to 5 life? This is it now. Like, I'm going to have to do this for the rest of my life, basically, or until I retire, which is, I don't know, like 50 years or something crazy. So, and I think that really hit me, and I was really unhappy during that time. I feel like I just came to terms with that, and I feel like lots of people go through this stage at some point after their degrees. I think for me, it just hit me a bit later because I was sort of self-employed after finishing my degree, if that makes sense. So I feel like that stage just kind of hit me later in life. I feel like most people maybe go through this in their first job after university, but it just hit me a lot later, and I was very unhappy with working a 9 to 5 at that point. Fast forward, right? And then I switched my job to the job I'm currently in, so we're in the present times now. And I've been in this job for 2.5 years now, and I feel like in those 2.5 years I've really like grown, and I really came to appreciate my 9 to 5. And I'm gonna tell you why. Sorry, this was a kind of like long backstory, but I think it's important to explain before I sort of go into how I made that work for me, because everyone's obviously in a different situation. I think it really depends on your background, your personality type, and your job. So I think these are like really important factors to consider. And I think also what I sort of referred to earlier, the like financial money side of things, because I think if you have a financial security blanket, you might be more willing to take risks with like being self-employed. And I think maybe not having a regular paycheck won't affect you as much if you do have sort of a financial security blanket. I did not have that for like various reasons, so I really crave that financial stability, as I said. But anyway, I digress. Moving on to how I made my 9 to 5 work for me. So I feel like the first turning point for me in sort of the journey to loving my 9 to 5 was the realization that your 9 to 5 does not define you as a person, and no one actually really cares about what you do for work. For me, like being a journalist, like working in the media industry, kind of became part of my personality, and that's obviously like a cool industry to be in, and people always said so. So I really felt like that kind of sort of went into my personality a lot, and I was just kind of like defining not my self-worth, but I don't know, I just felt really cool saying that I worked in the media industry, to be honest, and that was really hard for me to accept when I sort of moved into my 9 to 5 role. I also like, just to like digress slightly, but I live in East London, which is an area in London where lots of creative people work, lots of freelancers, lots of people working in creative fields. So you definitely get a different reaction saying like, oh, I'm a freelancer working in journalism, than saying, oh, I work in marketing, 9 to 5 in tech. People are like, okay. That was like, I think the main thing where I had like a mind shift, because I kind of realized no one actually really cares. Like people who care about you as a person don't care about what you do for work. And I honestly can't stress that enough, because some of my closest friends, I know kind of what industry they work in, and I loosely know what they do at work. But first of all, I don't care. And also like I don't really know what they do for work for some of them, right? Because I just don't care. Like that does not define them as a person or like our friendship at all. So I feel like that's like a really big thing to realize, that it doesn't define you what you do for your 9 to 5. And I think once you sort of detach yourself and your personality from your 9 to 5, it gets a lot easier to like your 9 to 5 job. Okay, So moving on to the second game changer. It was so important to get another sort of creative outlet. For me, it's obviously YouTube and also recently Substack. But I think for me, just having something outside of my job that I can sort of being creative and just putting out your own projects was honestly so important for me to be happier in my 9-to-5 job. I truly think if you're someone that works in like a creative field, just interested in like doing something creative, whatever it might be, right? I think having like a hobby or a project or just like something you're working on that you're passionate about, it doesn't have to be creative obviously, but just something you're passionate about and that you love is so important. I think maybe I shouldn't call it like a creative outlet. I think it's more like a passion project. I just think you need something outside of your job that you can sort of spend time on, that you can work on, that you can be proud of in a way, and that sort of represents you better as a person, if that makes sense. So I think that was so important for me to be happier in my job, because I don't know, I had something else to sort of focus on, had something else to think about. Overall, I can highly recommend just like starting some sort of passion project that's close to your heart. Having this YouTube channel honestly kind of changed my life in that sense, that it really made me first of all appreciate my 9-to-5, because again, I experienced invoices not being paid on time and like all that kind of stuff. But more importantly, I feel like having this like other thing outside of my job, creative outlet, the passion project, I think that really changed things for me, and I fall in love with my 9-to-5 and just be happier working a 9-to-5 in general. I'm very aware, I'm obviously lucky enough, I don't have kids yet, I don't have sort of anyone to take care of, I'm not a caretaker for anyone, so I obviously have the freedom to like focus on something outside of my job, which I really appreciate. And I know that's not the norm, like that's not the case for everyone, so I do appreciate that, like I'm aware of that, but I would highly recommend it if you do have the time. So like you don't have to maybe choose a project as big as a YouTube channel, which obviously takes a lot of time. But maybe just start smaller, maybe spend like an hour a week if you can on something that you care about and that you're passionate about, and see how you feel and see how you feel in your job. And I can only obviously base this on my experience. It really helped for me. Another thing I wanted to say is, what's really interesting is once I sort of stopped expecting my job to be like everything and sort of fulfill me in a way that a 9-to-5 in marketing just can't, just because of my personality and interests, I actually performed a lot better at work. I can't really explain it, but I think I was just like a lot better at my job because I was kind of able to let go of that pressure. As I said, like I was able to let go of that, like my job doesn't define me, and I was just trying to do my job well, and that's it. And I feel like as a result, I was just like actually performing a lot better at my job, which also then contributed to me being happier because I was forming like a better relationship with my boss, and I was just like being more respected, I suppose, by my colleagues. So that really contributed to me being happier in my 9-to-5 as well. Again, something I want to stress as well, like benefits about working a 9-to-5 that I really fully came to appreciate is being able to switch off after work, which I feel like as a freelancer is just not possible in the way that you don't have a set schedule like that, and you always wonder and you always have to chase new projects. I know that obviously depending on your 9-to-5 you're also thinking about your 9-to-5 after work, but everything I'm saying right now, I'm not talking about a toxic job, a toxic work situation. I'm talking about a job that has like good boundaries from the get-go, right? I think you can only fully ever be truly happy in a 9-to-5 if that's also a role that has boundaries and is like a healthy work environment, right? Just let me say that, right? Another thing that I think is really important is setting boundaries. So I take all of my vacation days. If I'm sick, I'm gonna call in sick. I'm not gonna go to work when I'm ill. I also work from home as much as I can. I do have a few office days where I sort of have to show up and just work with my colleagues and my boss, but that's very rare. If you obviously don't want to change your job for like a remote role, which I would recommend because I love having a remote job, I would maybe suggest asking your employer for more flexible working, more working from home days, because I truly think that's very much gonna improve your happiness and how happy you are with your job, because that massively changed things for me when I was moving from that job where I had to commute 3 days a week to a role where maybe I have to commute once a week max. Massively improved my happiness in my 9-to-5 job. Another thing I've changed, which is sort of in the setting boundaries bracket, is I'm saying no to unnecessary meetings, and that's obviously something that depends on your relationship with your boss, the role you're in. I'm in a position now where I can say, actually, do you mind sending me a summary or record the meeting for me, and I'm just going to read the transcript rather than being in the call if I am busy. Becoming less of a people pleaser, I suppose, at work. And I'm always saying, like, I'm sorry if any like men watch this video. I feel like my audience is mostly women, but just act like a man, honestly. Like, I feel like I was way too polite in my early years working in like a corporate environment, and now I'm just kind of like saying how it is. If I don't have time, I'm going to be like, actually, I'm not going to participate in that meeting. I'm just way more direct, I think, at work, which resulted actually in me being happier because I was sort of speaking my truth. And I think it's really important to speak up at work if something's up, if something's not working for you. I think rather than sort of becoming really deeply unhappy in your job and then maybe switching your job, I think it's really important to speak up. And I think it's just gonna make you happier as a person if you're able to speak your truth. And I really started doing that, like, I would say in the last year, for any reason, in a polite way. Obviously, like, you're still in a work setting, right? But I think you should always just communicate politely. It doesn't matter where you are, but I was just saying, hey, this doesn't work for me. And I think it actually resulted in I'm very lucky with my bosses and my managers, as you can tell, but it resulted in my 9 to 5 actually working for me a lot more because I was able to set my boundaries in that role. And I was also really clearly saying, like, these are my working times. I'm online from, you know, this point, and I'm offline at that point. And I really sort of stick to my boundaries. So when I'm offline, I'm offline. And I think that's really massively improved my happiness at work as well. Obviously, just do your best in your 8 hours, but then also feel fine just logging off and calling it a day. Hello. I'm very sorry, my battery died, so I had to change my location. But I just wanted to say, I suppose, as an outro, these sort of tips and steps that I mentioned only work if you're in a healthy work environment. And I can't stress this enough, right? Because I'm not talking about learning or trying to love your toxic job. I'm talking about trying to be more at ease and like liking a 9 to 5. That's a healthy work environment, right? Where I think the issue is more your mindset maybe than the job, which was the case for me. So I just want to put this out there as a disclaimer. And yeah, if you're struggling with your 9 to 5, I think it's all about perspective. I think we should see our 9 to 5 as a tool to sort of work on our real passions and our passion projects. Appreciate it for what it is. It's stability. It can work really well if you have flexible working hours, if you work remotely, if that's your thing, and if obviously your salary is right. And I think a big thing is also accepting that our 9 to 5 is not defining us as a person. And just to like close this up, I would love to hear your thoughts on this topic, because obviously now there's a bit of a controversial opinion maybe to say that I feel like a 9 to 5 has a bad rep, sometimes a bit unjustified, I think. So I would love to hear your thoughts on this topic. I hope that we can sort of go into 2025 liking our 9 to 5 more, because the reality is most of us are working a 9 to 5, and I think, you know, life is just a lot easier and better if you actually don't hate your job. So let me say that from experience. So yeah, if you like this video, please like and subscribe, and I'm very interested to hear your thoughts on this topic. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!